Everyone who is interested in quality knives knows about 940 Osborne, Bugout, Taggedout, Freak, Bailout, and Reptilian. After all, these are Benchmade's best-selling, most popular, most appreciated knife series. Hi there, knife people. Hello, lady and gentlemen. You are not at a knife store. You are inside my house, looking at collection in the towers of knives. And tonight, I pulled the lucky ticket. 13, case number 1, shelf number 3. This is a story time, and tonight the story is about the classic Bugout and its offshoots, Taggedout and Bailout. Of course, the marketing geniuses at Benchmade also released this OTF under the Out branding, called it Shootout. But these two knives have as much in common as Colt 1911 and a Browning automatic rifle. And this story will reveal a couple of interesting games that Benchmade is playing with us. Starting with the fact that there is absolutely nothing on this side of the blade other than the steel. When you look at the Reptilian, for example, you see it says Mel Pardue, who was a Hall of Famer knife designer and custom knife maker and passed away in 2022. Did you know that a Bugout was actually a derivative of an existing Mel Pardue axis lock knife that came out all the way back in 2012? And it had a 3 1/4 inch 154 cm blade, Grivery handles, axis lock, and it weighed 1.85 ounces. Does that sound familiar? Just 1 year later, Benchmade followed with a Model 531 Purdue axis drop point, which also had G10 handles and weighed just a hair more and coming in at 2.1 or 2.2 ounces. Now that should start looking really familiar. I guess the person at Benchmade that is in charge of extracting as much money as possible from the customer and paying out as little as possible to the designers decided that Mel was taking too much of a cut. So they said, okay, well, let's see what can we do. So what they did is they changed the blade shape ever so slightly, just enough so they can say it's a different blade. And they redesigned the handle to resemble more of a knife than a dagger. And the dagger made sense with 530, which had a dagger-style blade, but didn't make much sense with 531, which had a drop point shape. 530 and 531 Purdue were extremely popular with ultralight backpackers. It was a very useful EDC knife for somebody who is counting grams. In fact, Benchmade promotional material at the time said, blade for gram counting backpackers. And that was their philosophy of use. Knife can be very light and yet do anything you need. That explains the choice of color here, because when you're in the woods, that color stands out and you won't lose the knife if you drop it in the foliage, as opposed to the black 530 Purdue. So they killed a lot of birds with this stone. More money from the customer goes directly to the Benchmade's pocket. 530 Purdue was a black class knife geared toward servicemen, policemen, etc. So by making a Bugout a blue class and giving it this bright outdoorsy color, they hit that target audience really well. And it took off like you wouldn't believe it. What's funny, if you go back to YouTube of 2017, which is the year when this knife was released, you will find very few videos about it. You will find interviews at Blade Show and a SHOT Show with Benchmade with a zero mention of this knife. They talked about updated colors on the Reptilians and this new blade shape on the Reptilian, which actually Mel Pardue designed. They said very, very little, if anything at all about Bugout. You had to dig through some interviews that Blade HQ did later with a Benchmade rep. In that interview, he just basically cuts an apple with a with a Bugout. Gives it a very sort of how do I say it, anticlimactic send off into the world. After the Bugout came out and all the smoke blowers finished blowing smoke up Benchmade's ass, this one gentleman seen right here reviewed this knife in earnest. That was a great channel, by the way. Anyway, this knife performed so well in this one test that could put any knife at risk, especially something that's made out of, FRN plastic and as thin as a Bugout. Just take a look at what he's doing here. This abuse is extreme, and he even admits it in the video. Guys, those never-ending whines about how to not abuse the knife, they need to add, here's an inexpensive knife made out of S30V steel. And speaking of the steel, nowadays it's a widespread production tooling steel that a lot of manufacturers are ordering, and that's why it's so inexpensive. If you're wondering how could such a lightweight, slim knife withstand this kind of abuse you just saw and not close on itself, let me make a couple educated guesses here. First, because it's so slim, the crossbar is narrower and therefore lighter. If there's any relative motion generated by the strike between the blade, the frame, and a crossbar, the crossbar gains almost no inertia. It's a lightweight titanium. And speaking of titanium, brings me to the second point. Titanium, while it's as tough as steel, it's not as hard. So it's a more ductile material, so there's a little bit of a dampening effect. Another part of dampening effect comes from the fact that all the axis lock omega springs across all Benchmade axis locks are designed to close with the same amount of applied force. Just ergonomics dictates that if it's comfortable to apply 8 to 10 pounds to pull back on the crossbars, they would carry that across the entire lineup. Well, that means that for a larger knife like this Griptilian or 940 Osborne, the spring will have lower dampening coefficient in relation to the size of the crossbar itself. And speaking of 940 Osborne, while it's a great EDC knife, it does this with a scary regularity. Not the case with their carbon fiber one, and I don't know what the difference is. Those are the only two Axis 940s that I have. Just 2 short years after introduction of the Bugout, the 537 Bailout came out. This is not the original Bailout. This one came yet another year later with aluminum scales. The original had Grivery scales and was all in all comparable to the Bugout. Here they are side by side for you to see. The Bailout has just a hair longer blade. It's about the same thickness, very slicey. It's a tanto shape, but still high saber grind. Overall, the knife is slightly larger. So the original Bailout did not have a tungsten glass breaker, and then the 2020 release aluminum one does. Same concept here, titanium hardware to reduce weight. The screws and the pocket clip and the frame, this one also has a subframe. They are not titanium, they're all steel. Pivot, everything. The thumb studs are probably also titanium, just like they are on the Bugout. M4 is an excellent steel. I recently did a video comparing M4 to S90V. CPM. M4 is actually tougher than S90V, and with the proper edge geometry, it can cut at least as long as S90V. And what I learned from making that other video, that if you have M4 blade, you want to go as acute of an angle and as high of a polish as you can achieve through sharpening. And then you will extend the edge retention a significant amount, 300–400%. And if you don't believe me, watch that video. This is just as tough as a bug out. No motion in the ocean. I do have a video about how gimmicky this knife is. It was great for its time, but I have no idea how this is not the most carried EDC knife out of entire Benchmade lineup. This is still their best-selling knife. All right, almost immediately after release of the original Bugout, the aftermarket scales became available from Flightanium and other brands. And, you know, if you were lucky and you bought a knife on sale, I usually can get them 30% under MSRP, which brought this knife to about $96, if I recall correctly. So for additional $60–70, you could buy a set of premium metal scales and have yourself a semi-custom cool EDC knife. And the scales are always a good gift for somebody who owns a Bugout. I stole this blue coated or anodized clip from 748 Narrows. And you can get, I don't know if you can see, you can get blue titanium hardware for it. And then Benchmade has like exclusive editions with different companies. In this case, Benchmade has actually a long-standing relationship with Worksharp. So they made this limited edition in Worksharp colors. I really dig this color combination, and the blade is 20 CV. So Worksharp is being sneaky, because sharpening 20 CV, you will eat up a lot of your sharpening media that they sell you. Sneaky, huh? 2 years after the Bailout and 4 years after the Bugout came Taggedout. Taggedout is a hunt version of a Bugout, basically. It's the largest of the three, and this is obviously not the original color scheme. Here's the original color scheme. I haven't unpacked it yet. I'm keeping it in this blister package. This is how some of Benchmade knives are sold at the military exchange posts, military stores. What they got right, it still has the same titanium crossbar as the Bugout, but they got really smart on this one. They put a thumb slot, which on the ones that I tried works great. And what I love about that, you don't have to remove anything to sharpen the knife. You see, if you don't remove thumb studs, you know, they got kind of silly and they went back to thumb studs here, just so that they have that color accent. That's the Benchmade shtick. That's their thing. They added back these thumb studs. I would actually much prefer that they kept it as a slot, because just one time I forgot to remove the thumb studs before sharpening, and obviously the sharpening stone hit them, and what's worse, it potentially can cause a divot right here on the edge. So thumb studs are not my friends. They had their time in the sunlight. Now with new laser technology, much wider available in the manufacturing environment, this should be the standard for Benchmade and all other knives. Believe me, you can manipulate it just as well as the thumb studs. So the more dressy one came just last year, I believe. Was it 22? No, it actually came out this year, 2023. So they spacing them out a couple years apart. 2017 for the Bugout, 2019 for the Bailout, and 21 for the Taggedout, and 23 for this dressed up. And they have a Magna Cut version which has orange blade for some reason. Least attractive Benchmade I've ever seen, I think. As much as this is good looking, that black with orange blade version. Yeah, so rock solid, same blade thickness, so the same crossbar configuration, everything is the same. This one is a clip point. Let's do a side by side. Benchmade started doing these limited color editions. This is 2023, something about sunrise in the mountains or sunset in the mountains, I don't remember. It's not exactly pink, but I liked it better than the pale blue, whatever they call that, seafoam, I forgot. Anyway, this is probably the best of all worlds in the Bugout family. M390 anodized aluminum. And I like that the accents here are red. Reminds me of the Freak. I think it's the steel upgrade and the material upgrade is worth the price difference. Which brings me to the top of the line S90V edition of a Bugout with carbon fiber scales. They're slightly contoured, and everything else is pretty much standard with just differences in color. Oh yeah, this has this nice backspacer, which less premium Bugouts don't, but Taggedout inherited that from here. It's like an immense lanyard hole, which I like because I do use lanyards. And then S90V is in the same video that I already mentioned, comparing to other steels. Of course, that brings me to the mini Bugouts. I'm gonna start backwards. This is S90V carbon fiber version, and here is a good chance to compare sizes. So the knife is significantly smaller, but you're not losing a lot of capability because it's still a good size knife. This is just under 3 inches, which for normal people, it's the standard ADC size. That's how the original first production mini Bugout came out. It was either orange or Stormtrooper white with black. I couldn't find the Stormtrooper. I don't think they make that anymore, but they still make this orange. And I actually like it. Like if you compare it to the Worksharp yellow, it's pretty cool color, and it's the exact same orange as you find on the Taggedout, original Taggedout. So here they all are in roughly chronological order. And the only one that I'm really missing, I wish I could have, is the 530 Pardue. I think the next one should be called Screwed Out, as in Mel Pardue screwed out of his royalties. Listen up, gang. These Bugout family knives are the most counterfeited knives in a knife counterfeiting history. So be very careful. If the deal seems suspicious, don't buy it. There is a whole website called Benchmade Online, which is entirely fake. They sell fake knives only. On eBay, I actually fell victim to buying a carbon fiber 940, which turned out to be a total knockoff. So be careful. Be smart about it, and if it's too good to be truth, it ain't.